Hypertension is a huge problem. If I were to survey my contemporaries, I'm 76. I know amongst my friends in this age group, almost all of them are on medication. In my conversation today, I have a guest who is offering something that I think is truly groundbreaking. It is a way that you can manage hypertension, prevent hypertension. And we go into the science behind this and how Zona can be transformative and how health coaches can really educate their clients about this possibility using this device. So let me tell you about my guest, Dr. Mark Young. He is the CEO of Zona, the company behind the groundbreaking Zona Plus. This is a clinically researched isometric device designed to support cardiovascular health through brief guided hand grip sessions. With a career spanning entrepreneurship, health innovation, and consumer education, Mark brings a rare blend of business leadership and science-first thinking to the rapidly evolving world of preventive health. His work focuses on bridging the gap between cutting-edge research and practical, real-world solutions. In addition to leading Zona, Mark holds a PhD in functional medicine, where his research and clinical interests center on metabolic health, cardiovascular optimization, and the physiological systems that influence long-term resilience and longevity. I know you are going to really enjoy my conversation with Mark. Welcome to the podcast, Mark. It is so great to be with you.
Oh, you too, Sandy. I'm so excited to see you, and thank you for the invite. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Yes, it took a while, but we are very excited to learn from you because you are in a space that I think we hear so much about the dangers of, which is hypertension, and especially as we're getting older. And you have been a real innovator in terms of what you can do to control hypertension. So let's just get started with, how big of an issue are we facing with hypertension? What are the risks of hypertension? And then we can move on to the most effective strategies.
Yeah. So, the first thing I will say is that when 45.4% of the US population has diagnosed hypertension, that's a problem. That's a clear problem. And that is a problem that is like, there's the pandemic. Because now you're talking about something that's huge. But I want to take one step further back to that. And this is my belief, and it's going to be an overarching thing throughout my entire conversation. And that is, my belief is that hypertension, as we talk about it as a diagnosis, is a downstream issue. And it's a downstream issue. And once we put a label on it, we stop exploring. And I think as a people, once it gets a name, it's done. Now it's memorialized. And we say hypertension, oh, I have hypertension. It's like, no, hypertension is a downstream measurement of an upstream problem. But because we gave it a name and then, we're passing out pharmaceuticals for it like they're candy, we never go explore the upstream problem. And we've normalized it. Like, we have just normalized that hypertension is just something you have. And that's it. Case done, wonk, wonk. Like, and that's my issue. But literally nearly half the population has a diagnosis, not including the people who haven't been diagnosed, Sandy. So I would arguably say that number is realistically over 50%. And how is this that far out of control? That's what doesn't do it for me. Like, I'm frustrated with it.
Yeah. And what you've just talked about is really the need for functional medicine, which is going upstream. And okay, why is this person developing hypertension? And rather than just putting them on a drug, and I got to say, amongst my contemporaries, I'm 76, and everybody's on meds for hypertension, and They're just seeing it as a normal part of aging.
I had a nurse. I tell this story all the time. Anytime I lecture on this topic, I had a nurse come to my office and she was doing blood work. It was a mobile phlebotomist. And she came in, she did all of her stuff. She took my blood, she does or whatever. She takes my blood pressure. And it was, I want to say it was for a life insurance policy or something. And she immediately, she grabbed her pen, she put it to the paper and she said, "What medications are you on?" And I looked at her and I went, "None." No. I mean, like the usuals. Like, I don't mean like she's, now making the difference between, what are you on, for acute meds? No, I mean like chronic. Like, what are you on, like blood pressure control? And I looked at her and went, "Nothing." And she went, at the time, she's like, "Well, you're almost 50 years old. Like, certainly you're on something that's not normal for your age." And I went, "I'm going to tell you, like politely, for your age are like 3 words that I absolutely can't stand."
Yes.
Like, I can't stand those words because I'm like, should blood pressure be higher as I get older? Because if it were supposed to be higher, you would not control it. I'm like, it should be the same throughout your entire life. But why are you giving me this at your age answer? "Well, I mean, you know what I mean." And I went, "I do." And I'm like, but I didn't want to get into a pissing match with the lady over at the desk.
Yeah.
But I was like, stop using those words. Normal is normal. It doesn't matter what the age is.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I'm finding, like the guidelines, what is normal has shifted. So,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that? Like, how have they shifted? Because when I was getting my doctoral training back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was like,
Yes.
it was like, okay, 120 over 80, that was the standard. But now it's changed.
Well, so the American Heart Association, and if you look online, there's a lot of scrutiny to it. And I'm going to say that the American Heart Association issued this, and I want to say it's got to be about 2.5, 3 years ago now, albeit there was an update in 2017, and then they did another one in 2025, and it depends on where you look. But 120 over 80 was the number that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Like 120 over 80 was normal blood pressure. And then all of a sudden they came out and said, well, normal is actually 110 over 72. And, 120 over 80 is probably like a pre-hypertensive stage. And then anything over 130 is just considered elevated. And they got rid of stage 1 and stage 2. It's like, it's either pre-hypertensive or high. Like that's just the way they rank it all now. And I don't want to be a cynic about this, but I am. But the reality is, I'm like, what's the motivation? Like,
Yeah.
what changed suddenly that made normal not normal anymore? Because we talk about 45.4% of the US population having diagnosed. And I'm like, well, when you changed that number and said, well, no, 120 is pre-hypertensive and 130 is now considered elevated, systolic, of course. Like, did you just put 20% more people in the diagnosed category? Did you just create 20% more customers? Am I allowed to say that? Like, that's such a problem for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real problem. I think another issue is the emotional component. So when I worked as a health psychologist, I had many people refer to me for biofeedback for hypertension. There were doctors who believed, or they would say, for the ones who didn't want to go on med, well, there's this lady, she does biofeedback. I don't know what it is exactly, but, she's getting good results. So, but what I would often hear is, especially those who had home monitoring, and in those days it was not an easy test. You had to do it manually.
Right.
But they would say, I've noticed I go to the doctor and it's like the white coat syndrome. They would get so tense about having their blood pressure checked. And also it's just one snapshot in time. So can you comment on that and how it's...
Yes. And I will say that much like people ask me, like, should I be taking my blood pressure every day? And my answer is, well, sure, but don't trust any of the numbers. Like, you can take it every day, but blood pressure, kind of like your weight based on water retention, right? Like a few pounds up and down on the scale is nothing to go crazy about. There's going to be natural fluctuation, particularly in systolic blood pressure, which is that top number. And in systolic blood pressure, systolic is your SBP is very flexible based on environmental cues. A bad day at work will raise your systolic blood pressure. An argument with a spouse, a stuck in traffic, like all of these things can have environmental and impacts. And same goes for, as you and I know and have discussed, like everything from EMF exposure to food tolerances, like all of these things end up causing fluctuations. Diastolic blood pressure is not quite the same story. That actually is much more static. That number is actually less flexible. But yeah, you're going to get me going down a whole path of psychoneuroimmunology now. And when we talk about things like PNI, I'm a firm believer that the belief systems that we anchor in people's minds will manifest physiologically. And one of those ways is, for instance, what we mentioned earlier about putting a name to something, and now all of a sudden it becomes part of what I'm going to call an identity. Yes. That is, if I put a name to hypertension, and now I'm a victim of hypertension, and I believe the narrative and I accept the traditional path, my belief is that your body at a cellular level accepts this as normal and quits resisting it. It almost becomes your limp. And now you've accepted the limp and you're no longer trying to fix it. And because of that, literally, and I don't think people realize this, but at a cellular level, your body tells the immune system, don't even worry about that anymore. That is what it is. Let's just go fight other things. And it just turns that piece off. And then you become physiologically dependent, because that PNI, right, that psychoneuroimmunology has now taken that data and straight up told the world, don't worry about it. Like, this is already under control, let it go. And I think that's where we end up with so much hyperdependency on meds and on extrinsic sources, right? Like, we end up with these exogenous necessities to do the things that our body has been programmed from the beginning of time to be able to handle without. Yeah. And yet we start to develop this dependency on them, literally because we've turned off our innate intelligence. Did that answer that question?
Oh, yes. And I'm right there with you. You've just described my entire career in mind-body medicine.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Going back to the 70s, when I was teaching this, what's real in the mind is real in the body. That was my mantra. Yes. And once you have that as your belief, then it is possible to have dramatic positive changes. But if it's the opposite belief, I'm a hypertensive, and you are so scared, this, and we're not saying people should abruptly go off their medication or, not consider that this is a serious condition, but it is that fear that is instilled. And I used to get panic attacks thinking I was having a heart attack, because I remember a doctor when I was a child diagnosed me as a heart murmur, and I would just and then to this day, I've been here, this is heart month, and all this stuff is, I'm reading all this stuff, and all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm getting chest pains. I feel like,
and your brain echoes back.
Yeah. Exactly.
To this day, I agree with you. I feel the exact same thing. Like, it's a problem. And we don't treat medication, particularly antihypertensives, because there are other things, but particularly antihypertensives or people who live on pain medications. Yeah. These are scaffolds. These are nothing more than scaffolds to give us the opportunity to fix the system.
Yes.
They aren't the system.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I believe that our Western medicine has become, I saw a social media meme the other day, and I don't even remember who posted it, but it was, women who healed with herbs were considered witches, and yet men who heal with pills are considered scientists or something along these lines. And I'm like, you're not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for health coaches who are listening, or if you're thinking of becoming a health coach or working with a health coach, this is where they can really play a big role in helping you to connect mind and body and see that there are so many things that you can do, starting with changing your thoughts. Is this worth dying over? We used to say that, I have people who were experiencing this huge stress reaction over nothing, basically, and then being able to change your thoughts about it and have a different perspective, but also devices. So I want to talk about your discovery because I think it is brilliant. So years and years ago, I doing biofeedback, and there was a home device. It was called RESPeRATE. And people would use this, and it involves breathing, and they would then monitor their blood pressure and see, it's making changes. There was even one of the major medical centers in the Chicago actually did a controlled study of RESPeRATE for hypertension. And so it was the early crudest device. But now you have something, and I have it here, and I want you to describe this. This is Zona. So how did this come about for you to start to look at this as a possibility? And if you can just explain what this device is and how it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many things to comment on there. I love it all. Well, the first thing is, I will tell you, how did RESPeRATE, as an example, RESPeRATE is a device that actually it is a tool to help people do really good guided breathing, and it works because guided breathing works. And that's the beauty of that type of stuff, like literally breathing exercises. And what most people don't realize is the breath work itself is good, but the real activation behind breath work is vagal tone. It is actually triggering the vagus nerve, because when people end up in this heightened sympathetic nervous system, they're in this fight or flight state all the time, which naturally raises blood pressure, which is very normal. We think, caveman type responses, I'm in danger, or I want my blood pressure to go up when I'm in danger, because that helps pump the blood to all of the areas of the body that are needed to be hypersensitive for survival. The problem is people are living today in this hypersensitive space. Like, it's the people who are just always stressed out. And if you ask them why, they couldn't give you a solid answer. It's just, and the answer is, it's just everything. Look at the world. And you're like, you're not wrong, but none of that stuff is life-threatening. And your body is experiencing life-threatening symptoms over non-life-threatening stimulus. And that is that vagus nerve shuts down. And when the vagus nerve shuts down, your body can't regulate. I mean, it literally can't regulate. And breathing does that. Zona activates a little bit differently. And the device that you were holding in your hand is called the Zona Plus. And it is targeted towards cardiovascular health, but has a similar activation, but without the breathing exercise. But it is still increasing vagal tone in some respects. But there's three primary things that I want to talk about. Zona was discovered through an accidental discovery, we call it, and then it's that serendipitous. A researcher many years ago by the name of Ronald Wiley was doing a contract for the U.S. Air Force. And during his study, he found data sets that just intrigued him. So when the study was over, he took the data sets and he ended up correlating and proving causation, not simply correlation. And that's where I think a lot of people mistake science. Is correlation is the suspicion, causation is the proof. That is, he saw that everybody who was a fighter pilot and spent time behind in the cockpit of a fighter plane was experiencing lower blood pressure consistently. And he's like, that's really weird. Like, why is that happening? And he's like, well, that may just be correlation, right? Like, maybe these guys are just in top physical condition and that's what's happening. He later proved causation and saw that it was based on the grip strength that these men would actually have on the joystick, which is the control arm that guides the fighter jet. So when they were moving at high speeds, they would grip it very strongly for intense periods of time. He made it his life's mission to make this discovery and said, oh my gosh, like, there is actual causation here. This is an upstream. So the downstream was they experienced a reduction in blood pressure. The upstream was there was actually an exercise that was causing it. So over time, he ended up developing an algorithm that mimicked the exact experience that they had, and then was able to put it into more of a consumer-facing, let's say, form factor, if you will. Still very much looks like a fighter plane joystick, right?
It does.
I know, right? You feel like you're flying the plane when you grab it. What he actually did was he tapped into a science called isometrics. And isometrics, Greek words, equal measurement, right? And we always think of exercise as the up and the down, the up and the down. But isometrics, I always say sit-ups, for instance, require concentric movement, which is the up of a sit-up, and then eccentric movement, which is the down of a sit-up. Consider this a plank. It's not a sit-up at all. It's not an up. It's not a down. It's not a movement at all. In fact, it's a static resistance level at a very calculated, as a tension. Maybe that's the word. So when you're holding this max, you contract on this device, and it's algorithmically holding you at a very precise grip. So you squeeze the device, and then it calibrates and tells you how much to squeeze it and how little to squeeze it. And it guides you through just a 2-minute therapy on your right hand. You move to your left and repeat. While you're doing this, your body's experiencing 3 main things. Okay, it seems super simple, and probably the biggest problem in even selling the device is it's almost too simple for people to actually think it's effective. Research proves otherwise. But what is happening physiologically while you're doing this exercise is threefold. First thing, which is the easiest, that is your body, if it's not already, triggers into that sympathetic nervous system. I'm holding a static resistance. It's uncomfortable. Muscles are tense. Blood flow is restricted. And while all of that is happening, subconsciously, your brain gets a signal something's wrong because it's not comfortable. And your body likes comfort, right? We fidget in our chairs. We roll over in our beds. We do all of this stuff because we're designed for comfort, or at least that's what our bodies believe. When you're doing this, your body flips on that sympathetic nervous system. The first thing that happens when sympathetic nervous system kicks in is nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide production kicks in, goes into overdrive. Nitric oxide is the body's natural vasodilator. So all of your blood vessels widen because your body senses blood flow restriction in an area. So it widens blood vessels to get blood to flow in that direction because something must be wrong. So you get this hit of nitric oxide when you're using the device. You also get this flip into sympathetic nervous system. And when you release the device and blood goes back to normal, everything, you shake off that tension, it actually is a parasympathetic response, because parasympathetic response is safety. Nothing is wrong. Everything's okay. So using the device, as you're using it, you trigger sympathetic, you let it go, you automatically downregulate into parasympathetic nervous system because everything's okay. All right, danger's over. Everything's fine. The lion chased me. He's out of sight. I can stop running right now. I can walk. Then you go and you do it with the next arm. You pop up to sympathetic, you go down to parasympathetic. You pop up to sympathetic, you go down to parasympathetic. You actually are training vagal tone. You're teaching your body what downregulation feels like. So that's the one, if you can believe it, that's only one of the things that's happening. Crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
it is the craziest thing that all of this
Oh my
complicated science is
God,
taking place
yeah.
behind the scenes.
This is fascinating. I
Go ahead.
gotta tell you that as you described it, this is a kind of like progressive muscle relaxation, which is where you tense, and then you let it go. Edmund Jacobson in 1920 wrote that book, Progressive Muscle. I taught it to thousands of people, and that we didn't have what this is. We didn't have the Zona, but it was effective. But this is a high-tech way of actually doing that. I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, only one of the things that's doing that.
Yeah. And
The
what else?
the second activation that takes place is that when we age, and it's pretty natural and it's based on environmental and nutritional inputs, on the inside lining of the cardiovascular system is what we call the endothelium. And the endothelium is a spongy type substance that exists, and it is what allows blood vessels to expand and contract. It literally is that which is expanding when that happens. Well, over time, usually based on nutrition and environmental input, that endothelium begins to dry, and that kind of feels like a dry sponge. So over time, you can imagine a sponge that has no moisture to it, right? Try cleaning the inside of a glass with a dry sponge. You can't even get it in. So the only thing that happens to soften that endothelium is actually potassium. So increased potassium intake, but the problem is cells store potassium, and potassium in the body doesn't often get used the way that it should. Here's the combo shot to the corner pocket here with Zona. I'm using this device to restrict blood flow and to increase muscle tension. When muscles are held at a static resistance level, the body's natural response to avoid cramping or any kind of tightness in the muscle is sodium release. So as sodium moves into the muscle to stop the muscle from cramping, potassium moves also, because at a cellular level, sodium and potassium must always remain at an equal balance. So by forcing sodium out of a cell, I'm by default forcing potassium out of the cell. As potassium starts to move into the bloodstream, it moves through the endothelium, and the endothelium begins to soften. Over time, you're literally turning back the clock on the endothelial lining. So that endothelium now becomes flexible, and the endothelium is what's regulating blood pressure. Because if the endothelium can sense that the pressure is high, it naturally expands. When the endothelium is undernourished and dried, it can't even sense that the pressure is high, so it doesn't respond. So it's almost like you're rehydrating that endothelium, which is making the endothelium go, oh my gosh, when did the pressure get high? I didn't even know this was happening, right? And then it begins to dilate on its own, allowing pressure to be reduced. Okay, super cool stuff. And again, just it's that combo shot, right? Like I'm using a muscle hack to release sodium, and the sodium to release the potassium, and the potassium to soften the endothelium. So I use my muscle to lower my blood pressure. So weird. But that is biohacking. That is literally
at the highest level. Yes.
At the highest level. Like you're literally hacking into one system in the body to create I always talk about, when we were kids, there was a game called Mousetrap.
Oh yeah.
and the ball rolls down and hits the boot, and the boot flips over and kicks the bucket, and all of these things happen. And it's this upstream input that creates a downstream impact. And just as upstreams got us to negative downstreams, positive upstreams can lead to positive downstreams as well. And this is one of them. The third thing that I want to tell you quickly is something I just wrote a white paper on. I'll send it over to you. And that is the discovery of what we're now referring to as the Glycocalyx. And the Glycocalyx is a relatively new discovery in the human body. And it's almost, I would say, like fine hair, like the cilia that exists inside your body. And that it is very resistant to things like sugar and whatnot can destroy it. But what happens is that this fine like hair fiber that they've discovered exists even above the endothelium. So what happens is what's called shear stress. And shear stress exists as blood flows across. So imagine that it's kind of like the when you're in you're underwater, and the jet of water in the pool blows over your hair, right? Like the hair all just kind of moves underwater and moves with the current. Same thing that happens with the Glycocalyx. When you're using Zona, you're actually restricting blood flow, much like a kink in a garden hose. So the Glycocalyx is not feeling anything because there's not a lot of blood flow taking place. When all of a sudden you release that kink, your 2-minute exercise on Zona is over, blood flow passes across that Glycocalyx in a super high speed. That shear stress increases, and that Glycocalyx actually, you train it. To be honest with you, this is the body. Like we have this belief that the body is as it is, and then we just have to react to it, when in fact, even the brain itself is completely malleable and anything about our physiology can be changed. The glycocalyx is training. When it feels this shear stress across its surface, it begins to regulate pressure itself. And it's the one that's now giving the signal saying, no, we need to widen blood vessels. We have a deeper problem here. That's not normal to receive that kind of feedback from the blood flow system. And then the glycocalyx begins to respond to this. Like all of these things happening just because we're doing a 2-minute contraction. I mean, from the autonomic nervous system functioning to nitric oxide release to potassium release and sodium benefits and muscle constriction and strength that takes place by default to glycocalyx training, like all of this is happening because of a simple hack. And I tell people, like when people are not familiar with, I always laughingly say, like when people are like, well, I don't understand, what is biohacking? I'm like, it's literally causing your body's reaction to something that is, in most cases, not directly linked. It's not supplements. Biohacking is finding a way to hack into what your body has the innate intelligence to do. And often that's using the back door. And this is a backdoor approach to get what it is that we're trying to do. And it's fascinating, Sandi.
This is absolutely fascinating. What does some stories stand out? Some of the improvements that you have seen, people who have been using this?
So many. So I'll tell you, some stand out just because just what a positive reaction that people get when they're doing this, right? Like I don't say that it is a, we don't claim that it lowers blood pressure. We don't claim these types of things because from the FDA's perspective, we're still in the process of being able to say that. But clearly there is an advantage to cardiovascular health. So we say that we are here to support cardiovascular health, amongst other things. That being said, some of the stories that stand out, which I find amazing, is the people who get off of blood pressure medications. Obviously, like when people start doing this, the answer is habitually like, make sure that you're not on too much medication. Like if you're doing any type of diet or exercise program change and you're already taking antihypertensives, make sure you're checking that regularly because we're naturally supporting your cardiovascular system. Antihypertensives and, beta blockers and all this, like they're unnaturally supporting a reduced blood pressure, which means they're also unnaturally taking it too low sometimes. So check that stuff out. But obviously, I hear stories of people who are reducing their blood pressure using this. My own father being one of them, who has experienced a high blood pressure over years, is using this on a daily basis and watching his own blood pressure come down and reducing the amount of medications that he uses. Probably the funniest stories that I get on a regular basis are people don't realize all of the things that happen to your body when blood flow actually works the way it should. It's not just about blood pressure. I was at a conference years and years ago. It was an epigenetics conference out in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And this woman walked up to us and she went, "Oh my gosh, I have followed you guys. I need to buy one of these." And I was like, "Sure." Like, followed us. Why? "Well, I'm not buying it for me." And I was like, this is an odd gift, but okay, sure. What are you doing this for? "My brother is suffering with erectile dysfunction." And I immediately went to, "Why do you know that?" Well, he recently went through a divorce and blah, blah, blah. And she goes through this full story and she's a practitioner. And she went, "This is exactly what needs to happen for men who are suffering with erectile dysfunction, because that is nothing more than a blood pressure problem." Erectile dysfunction is a warning light that your cardiovascular system is in danger. And yet, what do? We give a pill.
Nuts, yeah.
Like we give you a different pill for that. And it's like, so yes, we get some crazy stories, but that is actually the number 2 reason that people tell us that they buy the device is increased arousal and stamina. And it's hilarious, but people have used it for so many different reasons. Because again, what do we say? Like where health goes, where blood flows, right?
Yeah. Well, that's great. It'll ensure compliance. And I love
Yes.
this that coaches can educate people about everything you just described, as well as suggest this device. So it is really exciting, and I just really applaud the work that you are doing. And we met at the Consumer Health Summit, and it is just wonderful. And to talk about consumer health and your mission, and how many lives are being changed for the better because of your work. So where can people find you, Mark, and where can they get one of these Zona Plus?
I love it. And what I will say to you, Sandi, is that we have the easiest URL in town. We are just Zona.com. And it's so funny to me because that is not a normal URL. Nowadays, you can't find URLs that are that great, but we've been around a long time.
Okay.
The other thing I will tell you is that anybody who goes to Zona.com, checks out this device, I encourage it. Any of your listeners can reach out to me directly. I am just Mark@Zona.com. I read all of my own emails. I will gladly help anybody who's a practitioner and wants to help train their people on this. We have pandemic level hypertension issues in our country. And if there's anybody who is paying a health coach through FMCA, I assure you that they have problems with their cardiovascular system, because that is one of the most common things that people are dealing with their health. And we've been fed all these stories about, reducing our sodium intake. And it's like, nope, not the problem. That was a faulty study. Like all the study did, and we get back to this correlation causation thing, right? Correlation, people with high blood pressure have high sodium. Why? Well, because they probably ate too much sugar, and sugar was causing sodium retention. Sodium does not cause high blood pressure. Anyways, anybody could go to the Zona.com website, check it out, reach out to me, Mark@Zona.com. And anybody who's interested in purchasing one, we've set up the coupon code FMCA100. And anyone who uses that saves $100 on their purchase. And that's just, our gift to your community, Sandi. I would love to talk to your community more often. It is just such a huge breakthrough that we can have on just general health in our country.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that generous offer. We will include it in the show notes. And to be continued, it has been wonderful to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Sandi.
I'm going to go practice on my Zona.